Okay, good morning. Shavua Tov. We'll speak a little bit about the Parsha as usual, and then go into our halachic discussions. There's actually a brand new halacha that I wasn't aware of all the years regarding Hilchos Shabbos, so it's always good to learn something new. So I'll get to that soon, shortly, B'ezrat Hashem. But first, at the Parsha, I may have said this in previous years, but it's always important to review, especially since it's a fundamental idea. The big question arises when you read these parshiyot as of Vayeshev till Vayigash, the parsha we learned yesterday. The big question that arises is, how could it be that the sons of Yaakov, who are seemingly all righteous boys, continued the path of their father, grandfather, great-grandfather, and yet they behaved so rudely, to say the least, cruelly, to say more than that, amongst each other. The 10 brothers against Yosef, a normative family of our days who could never believe such a thing may happen in normative families in our days between siblings. There's sometimes some sibling rivalry, but it doesn't go amount to such animosity, such hatred, such jealousy, up to the point where one wants to kill the other or sell them away, have them kidnapped to somewhere far away. So how could it be that this is what occurred in Yaakov's family? So Rav Kook comes up with a very profound, substantial understanding of what went on there. Yehuda, representing the 10 sons, versus Yosef, they had two different approaches as to what the main factor of Avodas Hashem should be in our world. It's all the way there. It's the roots and the outcome of Judaism per se. They had a dispute, they had differences of opinion as to what an Avodas Hashem, what an Oved Hashem is in Judaism. And what was the difference? The difference was Avodas Hashem bifnim versus Avodas Hashem bachutz. Meaning, we as Jews have the mission, we were created personally and as a nation, as a collective, to fulfill a mission of le'or goyim, to enlighten the world with holiness, purity, morals. That's our job. That's our mission in our lifetime. Or another pasuk, le'or goyim, is one pasuk in Yeshayahu. Another pasuk in Yeshayahu says, Am zu yatzati li tilati yisaperu. I created this nation, the Jewish nation, in order to glorify my name amongst goyim. Tilati yisaperu. Tell this over to the goyim. So the question is, how do we fulfill this mission? There are two ways to fulfill the mission. One is Yehuda's way, and the other is Yosef's way. What was the difference? We can explain it by a parable to a situation where someone dropped tens of pins on the floor. They're all scattered all over the floor, pins that we sew with that prickle you, somewhat dangerous. They're all over the floor in the living room. How should one collect them all back into their box? So there's one way of picking them up one by one. You just go around and pick them up. The other way is by using a magnet. You take a magnet, a powerful magnet, you put it in the center of the room, and they all cling on to the magnet, and then he got them all and could put them back into the box. So that's the difference between Yehuda and Yosef. Yehuda represented the idea of Avodas Hashem Bifnim, meaning that if us as Jews worship Hashem with all intent, with all kavanah, with all sincerity, and we do everything the way Hashem commanded us to, that itself, and as a collective, even more so, as a nation, we live a life, a Jewish observant life as a nation, and we have a government that follows Jewish Torah rules. A little bit far from that now, but Zat Hashem will come one day. So if we lead such a life in such a country running that way, then that itself becomes like a magnet towards the non-Jews, towards the entire world, where they feel drawn to the Jewish people just to see how is it working out so wonderfully for them. How is it such a paradise in this country of Israel that everything seems so smooth and quality of life is so high and they're so good to each other and so on and so forth. Of course, it sounds like a little bit of an utopia to reach that point, but reach that level, but we're supposed to strive towards that level. For example, look at all the inventions coming from the Jewish state and the entire world learning from us, taking from us. Technology being so sophisticated in Israel. Look at the health system. Now with the corona, we're doing one of the best countries now in the world with treating the corona. So there's a lot of light. There's a lot of light coming out of Israel. And that's where the non-Jews, the Goyim, see this. And they start questioning how are they doing so well? What's their trick? What's their way of life, their style? Now, we're not talking about we're not trying to influence Goyim to become Jews. So we're not trying to convert Goyim. They should remain Goyim. But by admiring us, by being inspired by us, because of that great light that comes out of our nation, of our country, that in turn should make them question themselves. Why are we so far? Why are we so unsuccessful related to the Jews? And then they accept upon themselves what they're meant to accept upon themselves, which is believing in Hashem and fulfilling 7 mitzvot b'nei Noach. That's what they're meant to do. And they're meant to fulfill the same. The Rambam says they're meant to fulfill the 7 mitzvot b'nei Noach, not because it's a humane style of life to live a good life, not to steal, not to murder, not to commit adultery, not to worship idols, and so on and so forth. The 7 mitzvot b'nei Noach, not because you're just more menschlich, you're more human that way. It's because Hashem commanded them to. They're supposed to believe in Hashem and in the fact that they're commanded in the Torah to fulfill the 7 mitzvot b'nei Noach. That's how Rambam says. Not just because it's a moral way of life, an ethical way of living your life, but because Hashem commanded you to. So when they see the Jewish people, the Jewish nation, how they worship Hashem, and they fulfill all the 613, and they see what great light that brings to their country and life, so they in turn will also accept Hashem and the 7 mitzvot b'nei Noach as they're commanded in the Torah to fulfill. So that's Yehuda's idea of how we fulfill our mission in the world as all goyim or as tilati sapeim. That's how we're supposed to do it. Yosef, on the other hand, had a totally different understanding of Avodas Hashem regarding our mission of becoming lo goyim. Yosef was Avodas Hashem bachutz. Yosef had the idea of going out to them, to Egypt, although he was sold. He didn't have much choice, but it brought him to the place where he had believed he should have been. It was a proper place for him. And we see how well he did. He became the vice president under the king, right under the king. And he really ruled over Egypt. Shem Shamayim Shagur Befiv, says Rashi. Hashem's name was always on his tongue. He was saying, Baruch Hashem, Todah Lakel, Bezrat Hashem. He was always mentioning Hashem. And he kept very, very strong, religiously, sort of speaking, whatever that meant in those days. But he kept very strongly connected to Judaism, to his father, to his forefathers. And he inspired the entire Egyptian population. He made them all Mitzvah. When they asked for, Rashi brings this, quotes this midrash, that when they asked for food because they were starving with a famine, so he first said, go do a bris milah. I'm not going to give you anything if you don't do a bris milah. So they went to complain to Paro. Look what this guy is doing to us. He wants us to go through this operation. What is he, nuts? Just want to eat something. So Paro said, why didn't you listen to him to begin with? He told you that by the dreams, he solved the dreams that Paro had dreamt. He told you there are going to be 7 years of abundance of food, and there'll be a lot of wheat and food to collect. Why didn't you collect? Why didn't you preserve and store a lot of food for the famine years? So they said, we did, but it all ruined. It all got ruined. Everything rotted. All that we collected got rotted. So he says, and Yosef, where he collected everything, no, that's fine. It's all good. He says, you better do what he tells you to do. Yeah, because you see, he knows what he's doing. So
I was going to ask for that. It's not one of the Sheva Mitzvah B'nai Noach.
Right, that's a good question. Yeah.
Because of the brothers, when they come down, they wouldn't be different. They wouldn't mock them. There has to be a better answer than that, Rabbi. That's really gone.
Yeah.
That's really nursery school.
I think it's mainly to control. If you tell someone to do something that it's completely not unnecessary at all, but he has to do it because you tell him to, so you're in control of him. That's in general. He made them locations to move from town to town. Why you do that?
The same motive as that. I can buy that.
Yeah, I think the same motive as that. Even though that too, Chazal, I think Rashi explains, because he didn't want his brothers to feel strangers. So he made everyone feel strangers in their own country. So it was always also based on caring for his brothers, but also based on ruling over them. Paro says that no one can lift up their hand or leg without your permission. He said that about Yosef.
Isn't he behaving kind of like a tyrant there, like a cruel tyrant?
For sure. I
don't know if cruel is the word.
Forcing people to breathe.
Yeah, and embrace that they wouldn't need.
They wouldn't be afraid of him. Come on.
Yeah, I think that's the reason. And
it's a long way from inspiring and being a light.
Yeah, you're asking how would that. On the other hand, they were very extremely appreciative to him for giving them food, supplying food, right? He's saying it's like ruining it.
It was at a price. It was a stiff price.
Yeah, a stiff price. That's true. Yeah, it's hard to get into his shoes because he was alone in a strange country filled with idol worshippers, adultery, full of adultery and impurity there. Shtufei zimah, it says the Egyptians specifically were shtufei zimah. They were all over the place with men and women and everything. And Chazal even say they had mishkav zachar all the time. They were homosexuals, a lot of them. So he's in a completely impure environment. And he's there for 22 years all alone. His family threw him out of the house. To remain insane let alone to rule over them, which I mean, insane, is unbelievable. You have to be very tough, right? I think that's the idea here.
Do we see that he was successful in bringing them to understanding of Kodesh Baruch Hu? We don't see any evidence. Do we that indicates that they became less immoral?
In his days, yes. How do we know that? Because it says, "Vayakom melech hadash al Mitzrayim" in Parshas Shmos. We'll be reading, "Asher lo yada et Yosef." A new king ruled over Egypt, who did not recognize Yosef. Now, some say some say it was a totally new king that really reigned after the power that was in the days of Yosef, and some say it was the same one, but after Yosef dies, he inflicts upon the Jews new Gzerah.
אני פה, לא, אמא שלי במכבי, אני פה. סליחה, אדוני, תודה. לא, אני פה עד שאמא שלי...
Okay. Inflicts upon the Jews terrible decrees after Yosef dies. Why does the Torah emphasize Asher lo yada et Yosef? Because all the years that Yosef was alive, he didn't dare, if it's the same paro, or even if it's a different paro, he didn't dare do anything against the Jews. So you see, Yosef had tremendous influence.
Power. Again, it wasn't necessarily that the people improved, but
yeah, but Paro was on top, was greater than the Yosef after all, and even he was nice to the Jews because I think they're
more I think Sandra's question is more what. Or the goyim, the kiruv, bringing them closer to believing in one God and that stuff. We don't doing any of that kind of kiruv. Am I correct? Is that your point?
Yeah,
you trying to prove?
Yeah.
Right. Rob is answering yes. Goyim had a lot of hakaras hatov.
But that's already a midah tova. That's I just heard last night on a radio show as I was washing dishes as usual. Motzei Shabbat, I heard an interview with a professor, a woman professor, who heads some institution or some university award about what's the topic she spoke? She spoke about. I just remember the idea of hakaras hatov. What was it? It was very interesting. She's involved with an interesting science. It has to do with psychology. Yes. She says within psychology, she's a PhD in psychology, a professor of psychology. She says there's a whole new branch, which was just in the 1990s discovered and researched. Began to be researched, and that is it's something we're all seeking for. Haga'ah le'osher, meaning it's a whole science. So it's a lot of research. What makes a person happy? Internally, content. The content feeling in his life. Because until then, psychology was based on fixing the past. A person who went through trauma or was brought up wrong, all those type of things. And psychology was in order to strengthen their personality. She said until then, if a person came out of the meeting with the psychologist not feeling terrible, that was already good enough. That's the treatment they got. Not feeling depressed and sad and sunken, that's enough. But then in the 1990s, they started working on the next level of making a person me'ushar, making him happy. That's what the psychologist should be doing. Besides leveling the person. Let's try to make him happy. And then she said, it's a whole science. There's a lot of research done on what are the components that make a person happy. The whole she's involved with that. She has an institution, and that's what they work on. So I was going to say she was obviously a Chiloni woman. I didn't see her; it was on radio, but the way she spoke, I understood she's a Chiloni woman. I was going to say, listen, lady, the first thing you should know to make a Jew at least happy is if he believes in Hashem and has Torah mitzvahs in his life. That's first of all. But of course, she didn't mention that. But what she did say is something very interesting. I think the one interviewing said that. Woman interviewing asked her if it's true, and she said it's true. There was a how do you say nisui? An experiment where they had two groups of people. Both groups were of people who weren't happy in their lives. They were displeased with themselves, and one group received treatment like in this institution of this professor, like with these psychologists that treat in order to reach the point of happiness and content feeling and osha and all that. So one got that treatment for a long while, for several months, years, or whatever. The other group, again, they began on the same level of sadness and displeased themselves or depressed and all that. And the other group did not receive any treatment whatsoever. All they were told to do is to be all the time, all day long, being thankful for anything good that happens to them during the day. And she called it with exactly the name Hakaras Tov, to be Makir Tov, to anything that's good that is done for you during the day. Small things even. Someone gave you a meal, so say thank you very much for the meal you gave me. Someone picked up something for them, thank you very much for picking this up. Be very thankful, be very Makir Tov during the day. For the same amount of months that those people were treated with all these sophisticated psychological ideas, and the other group, all they needed to do is be Makir Tov. In the end of this experiment, and she agreed, this is a fact. She agreed. Then in the experiment, the group that wasn't treated at all they did was Makir Tov, were on a happier level than the group that was treated with all the sophisticated ideas of psychological ways of getting them to be happy. So she agreed that. So the one interviewing sort of questioned her whole institution, because you're working on something that is nice, but we can solve the issue much quicker and much better by just having people.
Some of it's semantics. So this group, they're saying it's not treated, but it's a very intense intervention. I don't know if they have to write down throughout the day, every day, and like really track. That is a treatment. Just
it's true. That's true. Name. True, but it's a treatment that only involves one thing, one point in life. Hakaras Tov.
Important. Yeah.
It's very important. Oh, that's what I was going to get to. That's why I said this whole story.
It might be some of the essence of the more sophisticated treatments.
To get them to be
without that name, but it's embedded in those other treatments.
Right, but well. I don't know what the treatments include, but it seems to me like it's much more simple than treatments. You don't need to pay so much money for a psychologist just to be Makir Tov. Even if they write it down, it doesn't cost you more than the ink. Whereas here, you're paying for a treatment, seeing a psychologist on a weekly. It's a
mindset, and it's a commitment. It's like everyone knows they should get aerobic exercise 3 days a week, but until some doctor, some professional tells you, okay, you have to, this is your prescription, then maybe someone will do it.
Do it. Okay. No, I totally agree that this is like a type of a treatment also, I agree, but it's much less costly and it's much less sophisticated. It's simple, but it's fundamental. Oh, that's what I was going to get to. That Hakaras Tov is fundamental to becoming a good person. It's the most basic attribute of being a good person. So even if you just quote unquote, say that the Egyptians were makir tov to Yosef, that itself was bringing them to a very high level of good, of being good people. And besides, we said before, Yosef Shem Shemayim Shagur B'fiv. Everyone knew. They didn't know to begin with, but they knew after he met with his father and brothers that he was Jewish. And he was mentioning Hashem's name all the time. So it must have influenced, even if we don't read about it anywhere, but it must have had some influence, some enlightenment on them. After he dies, that's when everything goes downhill. After he dies, Ashula died Yosef, and when he dies, then the whole thing falls apart. And it all becomes cruelty and opposite of a karas hatov, and everything goes wrong. So corruption and all that. So he must have had influence, even if we don't know how much of an influence. Anyhow, so that's Yosef. Yosef was the one. Yosef felt that you have to go out there and influence in their countries, influence the going where they live. Not enough. Stay at home and do the right thing, and that will influence everyone. To go out there and do kiruv, again, not for Judaism, we're not trying to make them Jews, but to have them fulfill Shem Somin Noach and believing in Hashem. So now, what's wrong with doing both? Some Jews have the internal strength, meaning they feel their strength is internal, and they stay at home and they do all the right things and follow a very orthodox style of life, and everything is of that sort. And the country is a strong Jewish country, and yet we have some Jews, those who are have charismatic and good way of speech, and they go out there and preach outdoors in the world, all around the world, to believe in Hashem and do that. So what's wrong with doing both? With having two different types of Jews, some doing this, some doing that. So the problem between Judah and Yosef was, and that was their grave mistake, which they and then in the end came to realize, they had looked upon history, what happened before them. By Avram Avinu, he was chosen alone from the three brothers that were the sons of Terach. You have Nachor, Avram in the beginning of his life, then Avraham, and Haran, three brothers, and only one was chosen to be the chosen one, Avram Avinu. And then Avram had two sons, Ishmael and Yitzchak. Then he had many others from Keturah, but his main two sons were Ishmael and Yitzchak, and only Yitzchak was chosen. And then Yitzchak had two sons, Yaakov and Esau, and only Yaakov was chosen. So they're seeing 3 generations in a row that only one is chosen out of a few to continue the lineage of the Jewish, sort of Jewish. In those days, it wasn't yet Judaism, but the right path, the path of the just. Only the chosen one was to continue. So they thought, mistakenly, that by the sons of Yaakov also is going to be only one chosen to continue the lineage of Yaakov. And therefore, the fight between Judah and Yosef was vicious because it was fundamental. How should the Jews influence the world? How do we take Judaism and become the light in the world? If it's internally or externally. And therefore, it's fighting to death because I can't accept the other way. Because if the other way accepted, then I'm gone. And same vice versa. So says Rav Kook, this wasn't anything personal. It wasn't because Yosef was dressed nicer. It wasn't anything of jealousy that had to do with small things. It was a tremendous difference.
But he was a 17-year-old kid. He was 17 years old when everything happened.
So what? He had his way in life.
At 17 years old, his way of life, Hazal tell us, he was looking in the mirror and checking his hair and checking his eyes and checking his clothes. I mean, it's just so. I mean, it's a nice drush, but it really.
What is that? I don't understand. Where are you going to? Where are you going
teaches
to?
us. I mean, the Chazal teach us that he was an immature. He was immature. He was checking his physical looks. He was a teenager. He was tattletaling on his brothers. I mean, everything that you're
all that you're saying now. Of course, he was tattletailing on his brothers because he wanted to make sure that his fundamental, essential understanding of Judaism and how it's going to continue from Yaakov onwards will be the way he believes, not the way they believe.
We're not equals. We're not two adult men. One was a man, one was a kid. Put them on the same pedestal.
That's when you think about it today. But in those days, a 17-year-old person was completely mature. If he had the age,
examples how he wasn't mature. He gave a whole list of examples how he wasn't mature.
Why wasn't he mature?
He had aspects of, whatever, doesn't mean he wasn't a Hebrew or a God.
Yeah. If he wasn't mature, how did he stay so strong in Egypt, thrown out of the house, sold by Ishmaelim to Egypt, and left all alone, and he wasn't mature? Of course he was. He was very strong. He has a strong opinion.
Teenager, not for an adult.
No, for an adult. If Rivka at the age of 3 was able to be a shepherd over her father's flock and was able to marry Yitzchak and be who she was, at the age of 17, you're talking about a 70-year-old man like nowadays.
Don't say she was 3. They say she was older.
Who says?
The majority of them are 4.
The same Chazal you just quoted by Yosef, same Chazal say she was 3. So it doesn't matter if you're literally or not literally. You have to go with Chazal all the way. So we're saying Yosef was tremendously mature. You know exactly his way of life. When he was saying those dreams, he was telling them those dreams, he wasn't just acting like a child. He was saying, hey guys, listen to me. I'm leading. It's my leadership that's going to take over after Yaakov dies. And you're going to bow down to him. It's not childish. It's something that he was very strongly opinionated with. And Yehuda on the other side was opinionated by his way. There's a tremendous explosion between these two ways. And again, we're talking about something that's fundamental to Judaism. The only mistake, and they're right, both of them were right. The only mistake was that they didn't realize that as of Yaakov onwards, meaning as of his children onwards, there's no need to choose between. It's this and that. They didn't realize that. That was the point they didn't realize.
That's what the Haftarah was all about. The
exactly.
Of the two,
exactly. I was going to finish off with that. Exactly that. The Haftarah of Yechezkel that we just learned yesterday exactly describes the final collective manner within the Jewish nation, that we need this and that. We have the stick that Yechezkel was ordered to write the word Ephraim on, another stick to write the word Yehuda on, and then to stick them together and have them like one long stick. Oh yeah? Interesting. I never heard of that. Okay. So yeah, the idea is that in time to come, we're still struggling amongst us which way is the correct way. But in time to come, we'll understand that there are many correct ways that we have to combine together, unite everything together, and accept different ways of inspiring the whole world of what they should be doing and believing in. So that's a nice, exactly, the completion of the Parsha is the Haftarah in Yechezkel, prophesizing that this is going to be in the end of the world, of this way of physical world we're in now, that in the end we'll all unite and understand that we need both powers, both strengths of Yehuda and Ephraim, Judah and Yosef, to influence the world. We need a strong internal nation from within, and we need those who can be messengers to take the message out there and influence in the world.
How do we understand it? When Yosef was already in the pit,
yeah,
Yehuda could have left him and said, no, let him die. But instead he said, no, what profit is it if we let him die, let's
good point.
Let's sell him and leave it in the Kadosh Baruch Hu's hands.
Oh.
In other words, it's almost like he was saying, I think I'm right. I believe that I have the right dera.
Right.
But it's not my decision.
Oh,
ultimately, it's
exactly. That's what
decision.
Chazal. That's what the Rav Kook says. Exactly. He says, let's test Yosef to see if his way is right. How do we test him? By sending him out there. If you believe, as a strong Jewish belief, that the way to influence the goyim is by going to them, being there, let's test. Let's see if you're right. We'll send him there. What's that?
That's a tough time.
Yeah. But that was at least right. I was going to say it's less tough than what they had planned to begin with. Right. Let's test you. Let's see if you're right. And in the end, they were both right because they had built a very strong family from within, and yet Yosef was very strong out there, and he was able to conquer the world.
Like you said, that makes Judah into more of a man with insight. That let's see if we have a conflict here, so let's see how to resolve it. Let's not kill him. And it's a very nice way to put it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's Rav Kook. Who's finding it? It's in Shmuot HaRayah. We have the book over here. It's called Shmuot HaRayah, where he speaks about different divrei Torah on the parshas. We just have Bereshis, the volume of Bereshis here, but that's where it's found. Okay, now to go to our halachic discussion. So, firstly, what I said in a moment. Okay, Jonathan's already had to leave, so Shavua Tov, Jonathan. So a new, I wouldn't say a new halacha, but another detail within halacha that I never realized before, and it comes up every single Shabbat and Yom Tov. And never thought of it, but I heard it and it sounded to me very reasonable. Then I looked it up in other books and it seems to be true. On the radio show of Rabbi Phil Malka on Thursday evening, where I try to listen to, he gives questions and answers for 2 hours from 10 to 12 every Thursday evening. Very beautiful. Yeah, wait. But yeah, those are the hours he gives it. He's very, very smooth, very knowledgeable, very clear, unbelievable. So this person comes on radio and he asks the following question. He says, we know that there's it's necessary to have kavana before we do any mitzvah. Right? Mitzvot tzchot kavana. It's something that, at least for deraita mitzvot, it's necessary. For derabanan, for rabbinic mitzvot, it's a dispute. But the Mishnah Berurah, this is in Siman Samech, Siman 60 in Orach Chaim. The Mishnah Berurah finalized that even the mitzvahs derabanan need kavana, meaning before you perform any mitzvah, you're supposed to at least think. You don't have to say it. At least think in your mind. Hareini mechaven lekayem mitzvat so and so. The kavana, you're about to perform a mitzvah. Like Hashem commanded me. So before you put on tefillin every morning, before you say Birkas Hamazon, before you put on tzitzis, before you shake the lulav, before you eat the matzah, anytime you're about to perform mitzvah, have in mind, think it clearly that Hareini mechaven lekayem mitzvat bor'i להניח תפילין, or מצוות בוראי לטטף בציצית, or מצוות בוראי לבאר ברכת המזון. It is. It's me'akev. There's no, without that, your mitzvah is gone. You haven't performed the mitzvah. You just put on a box on your.
By putting on the box, it shows that you're doing it for the mitzvahs. No one puts on a black box with another strap.
Okay.
No one does that.
So you're saying it's clear from the fact that we're doing something abnormal that's not normal conduct of a human being. So it's clear doing it for a mitzvah purpose and not for the fun of it. So you're right. That's the Chaye Adam. The Chaye Adam says what David just said, that if it's something that doesn't make sense as a normal human conduct to do, so it's obvious that you're doing it for the sake of a mitzvah. So then he says, B'diavad, you're yotzei the mitzvah. Because it must be that your intention is to fulfill mitzvah of Hashem. Otherwise, why do you put on these two boxes, black boxes on your hand and head? But b'diavad, lechatchila, you want to perform the mitzvah lechatchila. Imagine we put on tefillin with all the halachos. Mehudar tefillin, $1,500 they cost, or totally mehadrin tefillin. We put an exact correct spot. We wrap it to the way we're supposed to. We say the words around it. Everything is perfect. But if we didn't have clear intent to fulfill a mitzvah in our mind to clearly think so, then the mitzvah is diavad. It takes away a lot of the level of the mitzvah. We're yotzei, but b'diavad, if we did it on a very low level, we're yotzei. We want to be lechatchila. We want to be lechatchila Jews. So a lechatchila Jew thinks before he does every mitzvah, before he performs any mitzvah, that I'm doing it for the sake of fulfilling a mitzvah that Hashem commanded me.
For something unusual like tefillin, like
yeah,
right. Take a mundane thing. I'm washed. I'm going to eat an apple.
Okay.
Aren't I showing my intent? Whereas opposed to a non-Jew or a non-religious Jew, I stop by say a bracha on a mundane thing that could have just happened. That how many times has somebody got a piece of something? So
that's another. Okay, perfect. Harley is saying something besides the unusual conduct. We're also saying a bracha. Now, taking an apple is not a good example because that's not a mitzvah. It's a brikas hanenin. It's not a mitzvah. But you're talking about the bracha of tefillin. What could be more clear than that? That my intent is to fulfill the mitzvah of tefillin. So that's 100% correct. That's lechatchila already. That brings us up to lechatchila, because then we're saying, you Hashem, we're being blessed by Hashem, who commanded us to fulfill the mitzvah of tefillin. That's clear intent to do this as a mitzvah. So that's perfectly correct. But what happens by mitzvahs that there is no bracha? There are some mitzvahs, even mitzvahs esse, that there isn't a bracha for them. For example, giving, right, I was going to say any ben adam l'chaveiro, visiting the sick, bikur cholim, giving tzedakah, respecting our father and mother, kibud avayim, all the, going to a funeral, going to chasana, all the ben adam l'chaveiro mitzvahs have no bracha. And that's another question. How come they don't have a bracha? Why don't we say before we walk into the sick person's home? Let's make a bracha. Before you give tzedakah, and then hand it to the. Right. So there are a lot of answers. One of the, I think, nicest answers is the Rashba. Rashba was asked this question in his Shut Rashba, and the Rashba answers the following: Ben Adam l'chavero mitzvos always include another person. You need to have the sick person, you need to have the needy person, you need to have the funeral with the people accompanying it. The chassan, you need to have the chassan kala there. Always includes another person. He says, what happens if you say the bracha? And the ani disappears. He's not there anymore. They said a bracha vatala. Anything that's dependent on another human being, it's not on your own self only, you can't say a bracha because you never know if that person will actually be there or need what you're about to help him out with.
Isn't that happening on the same odds of you saying work race and you drop the apple and it gets all dirty? You can't.
No, but that's dependent on you. That's only you. So if you hold on strong to the apple, it's then you can help it. This way you can't help it because it's not dependent only on you. That's what the Rashba says. By definition, right? That's one answer. Some others say an answer. Some other Rishonim give an answer. I think the Abu Duram says this, that a mitzvah b'adam chavero, true that we have it as a mitzvah, but it's also something moral. It's a moral conduct that any human being in the world should be doing. It's not specifically that Hashem commanded us. Had it not been for Hashem's commandment, we wouldn't visit the sickly. We wouldn't give tzedakah to the needy.
It's evil. It's us.
Right.
Nobody would have done it. Huh?
No one would have done it?
I mean, I don't know. What is wrong?
Yeah, I could.
Huh?
I mean, there could be a nice person who thinks, so my brother died. He had no children. Let's marry his wife. It could be. It doesn't have to be, but it could be. To be nice to her, she's left alone. It could be. It happens a lot. It's not the same case as Yibum, but it happens a lot where two siblings marry two siblings. Like you have two sisters marrying two brothers, families. So you see, sometimes it also makes sense. Two brothers who grew up in the same home have similar personalities, similar backgrounds. So if one brother married a woman and he dies, it makes sense that she can fit to the other brother. Not always, because many times the personalities are very different from one another. But then they do chalitza. If he doesn't feel comfortable marrying her, then it's chalitza. But it could be normal. Anyway, by the way, I'm not so sure. Interesting to look this up. If there isn't a bracha on Yibum, I have to look it up. Because we have a bracha over Kiddushin. According to Rambam, that's a mitzvah a bracha over the mitzvah of Kiddushin, of marrying a woman. He really should say that. The rabbi says it, you mean, right? He says it only as a shaliach of the man, of the groom. Yes. Yes. It really should be said by the chassan. The only reason it's not said by the chassan himself, rather by the rabbi who's officiating, is not because the rabbi is marrying this woman. it's the chassan marrying this woman. The only reason he doesn't say it alone is not to embarrass those who wouldn't know how to say the brach. That's the only reason. Because there are chassanim that don't know how to read Hebrew, and they can't even repeat what the rabbi tells them to say. It's a long bracha. Many words, a little complicated for those who aren't fluent Hebrew speakers. So Chazal decided, I don't even know when it started, if it's days of Chazal or later on. It's interesting to look it up. When did it start, the custom that the rabbi says the bracha instead of the chassan himself? It's really meant for the chassan to say. But in order not to embarrass those who can't, they say no one says it. They made a set rule. No one says it, only the rabbi. The rabbi should be knowledgeable enough to say the bracha, hopefully. Unless we're talking about those who never learned Torah and they think they're rabbis. But we'll go into that. So anyhow, back to what we're discussing. Yeah. So like this.
Rabbi,
if
you should feel good. They're too busy getting out extras for restaurants. Don't worry about it. You shouldn't worry about it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very comforting, very comforting. Thank you. Yeah, busy around, busy going to the hotel and doing wine and things. Anyway, so we said if a person doesn't have kavana for fulfilling a mitzvah, he does it. So if there's a bracha, that's completely like having kavana. You don't need anything besides that. If it's something that's unusual for a human being to do, then according to the Chayadam, b'diavad, it's good enough. It's not me'akiv. It doesn't cancel your mitzvah totally, but it's on a lower level. Better yet to have direct kavana. But if it's something normal that any human being can do, and there's no bracha involved, then if you don't have kavana for the mitzvah, then you're doing a nice thing, but you're not fulfilling a mitzvah. You don't get a mark up in heaven for fulfilling a mitzvah. You could be visiting the sickly every day. Bikur Cholim every single day. You go to hospitals, you go to Beit Levenstein or all these places, and you're doing a wonderful thing. Your chesed is unbelievable, spending hours visiting the sickly every day, but nothing will be marked as a mitzvah for you unless you're mechaven shel bikur cholim. As a mitzvah says, I'm not saying you did a great deed, you get a big mark on chesed, but you'll be lacking the fact that this chesed also becomes a mitzvah. You're performing a mitzvah of bikur cholim. Something spiritual.
Hashem keeps forward.
Yeah.
Remind me of the famous Gemara.
Yeah.
We were discussing Chazal.
Right.
They were fighting. The rabbi was saying he doesn't deserve Gan Eden.
Right.
Bosco said, let me decide.
Go back to your
go back to the ox. I mean, this theological stuff is really.
No, but this is something that's halachic. This is clear halacha.
Theological.
Why not halachic?
Why not halachic?
Yeah.
We're playing God. That's why.
But Hashem told us, if you're not mechaven to mikay mitzvah, then you miss the mitzvah.
Yes, but we do it the same way we don't know the rewards of mitzvahs. The act of tishmon, we don't know. What we may think is big is small. What we think is small is big.
Okay, that's true. But when it tells us, Hashem tells us.
And Hashem said, people that are big here are no one.
Are the opposite there, yeah.
There's a reason why Hashem said that. There's a reason why we can't.
Right, we can't calculate Hashem at all, right?
Exactly. So
but all we know is that with the score of mitzvahs, we're not saying how much reward you'll get. You could get tremendous reward just for being a good guy. But I'm saying for the score of mitzvahs, that's not going to be marked as a mitzvah for you if you didn't have kavana l'shem mitzvah. That's it. That's all I'm saying.
You may have a greater reward.
Right. You may have a greater reward, but not a mitzvah category. Okay, fine. But why not gain both? Be a good man, be a good guy, and gain a mitzvah.
But with the way the Rav is talking, if someone would walk into the class, not one of us, and hear the Rav talking, all the reform are not affiliated, not religious Jews, and not Shomer Shabbos, all the good deeds are worthless, are baseless.
Not from the point of view of chesed. I said they're good people. They have good intent, and they're behaving nicely to others, but they don't get a mitzvah out of it because they did not say mitzvah. Yeah.
But the example you're giving for Cholim is exactly one we just talked about, saying certain things don't have brachas because they're makam l'chavero.
But there's still a mitzvah. They just don't deserve a bracha, but there's still a mitzvah. Hashem taught this to Avram when he came to visit him when he was sick with his bris milah, the third day bris milah. Hashem says Rashi, it's definitely a mitzvah.
So you're saying the thing that you say before you go visit somebody who's sick,
right?
You don't say Asher K'Shanu Mitzvah.
Correct.
You don't say that part.
You don't say that part.
But you do say
Hareini mechaven lekayem mitzvat haboreh levaker cholim. Right. Just that line, not a bracha.
Right, it's not good enough to say I live a good moral life. You have to do the acts of that.
Exactly. By the way, the one who said your line perfect, exactly your line is the Kuzari. The whole book of the Kuzari, Rabbi Yehuda Levi, is based on a dream that the king of Kuzar had dreamt, and it was repeated over and over again until he understood that something's trying to shake him, and he has to find out what the meaning of this dream was. What was the dream? He heard a voice in the dream saying to him, "Kavanatcha retzuya melech Kuzar, aval ma'asecha inam retzuim." Actually, that's the opposite. Your intent is good, it's positive, it's correct, but your deeds are not. Your deeds are wrong. That's quite the opposite. But we see that tense
juxtaposition.
Yeah, this juggling between the two. We see that there's intent and there are the deeds, and they don't necessarily fit with one another. So he went to seek by different different religions and philosophers of those days what the meaning of this dream is, and no one pleased him. He went to the Christians, he went to the Muslims, he went to the philosophers. No one pleased him with their answers until he got to the Jews. So obviously, Rabbi Yehuda Levi who wrote the book. So we know the final conclusion, how it's going to be. But there's an extensive, very long discussion. Thick volume of the Sefer HaKuzari is all answering his question, and that's how he discovered Judaism. And he goes through the entire, it's a huge way to write. In those days, it wasn't very frequent that you wrote a conversational book, like a book of conversation between the king of Khuzar, a dialogue, and king of Khuzar and the rabbi, back and forth, back and forth. It's almost like writing a play. This says that, this enters that, that. Very nicely written. And that's where you learn a lot of fundamental philosophical ideas of Judaism. Read Alevi. It's one of the most important books of Emunah to go through. If you have some time, choose the book of Kuzari. It's translated in English also. Read in English even. Very important book. Translations of the Kuzari? Nice. Very nice.
The word mitzvah, the shores of Tzadim Vav Hey.
Correct. Commandment.
Now, there's somewhere I heard a word that Tzadim Vav Hey also means connection.
Correct. Yeah, we said that. Maybe we heard in this class. We said that several times. That's Hebrew. It's the word sevet. Sevet is like a crew, right? Sevet sfina. Team. Right, but that sevet is teamwork, correct. So who are we teaming up with? When we fill a mitzvah, who we team up with Hashem. We become a sevet with Hashem. Every mitzvah connects us to Hashem. Now we're together. Not only because Hashem commanded us to do it, but because the Chazal say Hashem fulfills all 613 mitzvahs himself, whatever that means. Chazal and Brachos, Davav, say that Hashem is meniach tefillin every day. Of course, it doesn't mean literally black boxes or anything, but it means there's some essence there that's divine conduct, and we do the same, and it's a mirror image between us and Hashem, and that's how we become a tzevet. We become a team.
So it's Tzadim Vav Hey is the same shores but different meanings.
Yes, tzevet is Tzadim Vav Taf, but it could be that the taf there, to think a moment grammatically, if the taf there is the shoresh, it's a bit. I think the taf there is from the shoresh of tzevet, but it's very similar. And the Rav Hirsch in his commentary on the Torah, many times, repeatedly, tens of times in his Perush on Torah, he says that not only the exact same shoresh, the exact same 3 letters of the shoresh mean the same idea, but also similar shorashim mean the same idea. So it's enough that there's similar shoresh, that's already makes them close to being the same. So, yeah, because actually when we say, I'll tell you what, how do we say the verb of tzivui, of commandment? Letzavot. Letzavot is to command someone to do something. Okay? Now that adds the taf there, letzavot, which makes exactly the same word of tzevet. So there we find the complete connection between the 2 words. Letzavot, to command, and letzavet, to become a team. Exact same letters. So they're very, very similar ideas, and that's where mitzvah is. The mitzvah is to team up with Hashem, come closer to Him, and He comes closer to us. We're both doing the same action at the same moment. We're put on tefillin, He's put on tefillin. It's the same. We're together in the same team. For every mitzvah, for every one of us. That's something we can't fathom because we're all doing at the same moment or different moments all the time mitzvahs, and He's everywhere. But that's the idea. Hashem is everywhere. He's doing the mitzvahs together with us every single second, and each one of us is doing a mitzvah. So that's the togetherness we have there. Anyhow, back to, this is a long background to the halacha I want to get to. this new halacha that came up in Ophir Malka's radio show on Thursday evening. So this fellow gets on the line and asks the following. He asks, since we know that it's me'akev, we have to have kavana before we fulfill a mitzvah, that in order for it to become a mitzvah. And if it's unusual, then b'diavad, you don't need it, but it's only diavad. And if there's a bracha, it counts for his kavana, but if there's no bracha, it doesn't count his kavana. So he says the following: Tosefet Shabbos. Okay, to accept Shabbat earlier than Shkia, we need to midoraita. It's a Torah mitzvah. Torah. Where do you find it in the Torah? We have to add mikodesh lechol. We have to add some moments before Shkia, before sunset of Friday. We have to add some moments, so a few minutes of holiness, as if it was Shabbos already. We learned from the pasuk in Yom Kippur. Betish'a lachodesh ba'erev, me'erev ad erev tishbetu shabbatchem. The Torah says that on the 9th of Tishrei, it doesn't say the word Tishrei, but Tish'a lachodesh, the 9th of the month. Which month? The 7th month. According to the Torah, that's how we call Tishrei, Chodesh HaShvi'i, 7th month. So the 9th of the 7th month, the 7th month, ba'erev, at night. Tishbetu Shabbatchem, refrain from melacha. Since when does the Torah speak like a goy? Our Torah is Jewish. The Jewish calendar doesn't work that way. It's not, this evening is not Sunday evening or Sunday night. This evening is Leil Shani. The moment is sunset, becomes Monday. There's no meaning, no such thing as Sunday night, today after 5 o'clock. After 5 o'clock today, Sunday was last night, exactly. By the way, I know a person in Kiryat Moshe, where I used to live in the neighborhood in Yerushalayim. His name is Tanchum Shiftan. He is very, very stringent and strong about not using any secular date whatsoever for anything.
He told us the banks love him.
Right, the banks love him. He's an accountant, by the way. It's hilarious because that's the one occupation you have to use, but he doesn't use the secular date at all. He only uses Hebrew dates. When he got Miluim, he's now older than, he doesn't go to Miluim anymore, but he used to get Miluim. He used to get the tzab, the note that tells you to come in for reserves, the order. He used to get it with a secular date. He ripped it up. He never showed up. So they call him, what's going on? He says, till you send me a tzav without the English date, I'm not coming. So they have one, he's the only soldier in the Tzahal. Oh, so they bothered to write only the Hebrew date in order to get into Miluim. He has on his email, he has it all erased. You can't see any secular date on his email. He's able to do it in his computer. And when he sends out emails, no secular date. He's unbelievable.
He must not have a lot of international dealings.
Yeah. I guess not. Yeah. But he also prints out every year. He prints out a calendar with only Hebrew dates. But that I've seen other institutions, other yeshivot do as well. There is no secular date on the calendar. So why did I get to him?
Because you're saying the night before the night.
Right. So he always speaks that way. He says Sunday night when he means Motzei Shabbat. Or he says Monday night. You have to just understand his language. Because he can tell you, let's meet Monday night at 7 o'clock. You come tomorrow evening, you miss the meeting. For him, it's tonight, Monday night. That's how he talks.
So
he always corrects people. What do you mean Sunday night? You meant it was already. It was already. You mean Monday night? Yeah.
So what is the Torah saying?
Now Tish'a lachodesh ba'erev is against Tanchum Shiftan. The Torah is against him because what is it saying here? It's saying when does Yom Kippur begin? When should you refrain from melacha? Tish'a lachodesh on the 9th of the 7th month of Tishrei ba'erev. Sorry, at the night time. But that's not true. Tish'al HaChodesh ends at Shkia, Ba'erev is already the 10th of the month. So how can the Torah say? It's like saying Sunday night about this coming night, this coming evening. So it's against that. So Tanchum is correct after all. He's right. Why? Because the Gemara learns out from this Tosefet Yom Kippur. Because the Gemara asks the question, how can we call this Tish'al HaChodesh Ba'erev? How can we speak like Goyim that continue the day until midnight of the day of the previous day? For them, it's really Sunday night this evening, because it's until midnight that it switches into Monday. So how can the Torah speaks that way? So the Gemara answers, from this we learn that this Tosefet Yom Kippur, we must refrain from melacha, tishbetu Shabbatchem, when? Betish'al HaChodesh. On the 9th of Tishrei. Already then refrain from melacha. And also ba'erev. And then also at night. But firstly, make sure to stop to refrain from melacha on the 9th, which is the day before Yom Kippur, before sunset. And that's where you learn the Tosefet Yom Kippur. And then it says, me'erev ad erev tishbetu Shabbatchem, from one night to the next, which means that there's a Tosefet Yom Kippur at the end of the day also. Meaning as we leave Yom Kippur, Motzei Yom Kippur, also make sure it's similar to Gzei Shava. It's like actually saying, take this 24 hours ahead and do the same in the end of Yom Kippur. Meaning add some moments, extra minutes of refraining from melacha after Tzet HaKochavim of Yud Tishrei, when Yud Tishrei exterminated, add some more moments to Yom Kippur afterwards. So that's what we learned Tosefet b'Knisato u'v'Yitziato. Now, the Rambam holds that there's no Tosefet for anything else for any other day besides Yom Kippur. Because only on Yom Kippur it says, so we only have Yom Kippur. For no other holy day does the Rambam require Tosefet. In Rambam, there's no Tosefet Shabbos, no Tosefet Yom Tov, only Yom Kippur. Now, some hold that the Rambam meant Midoraita, that the Doraita level of Tosefet is only true to Yom Kippur, but Midorabanan, we need to have Tosefet for Shabbos and Yom. But some say he meant completely nothing. No Tosefets for any other day of the year besides Yom Kippur. But that's the Rambam's opinion. We don't hold that way. The Shulchan Aruch in this case, paskins like the Rosh and the Tosfos and all other Rishonim, who hold that not only is there Tosefet for Shabbos and Yom Tov as well as in Kippur, it's Doraita for all the rest as well. How do we learn from Yom Kippur? Because it says Tishbetu Shabbatchem. The word Shabbos appears there. So that's like a Zero Shabbat. To say, if on Yom Kippur it's Tosefet and it's called Shabbos, so also every regular Shabbos is also Tosefet, Midoraita. And Yom Tov, because Yom Tov is also called Shabbos. By Pesach, it says that the following day after Shabbat, we start the Omer. What do you mean after Shabbat? If Pesach falls on a Tuesday, then it's not Shabbat. So from here we learn that the Yom Tov is also called Shabbat. Unlike the Tzdukim, who hold that it's literally Sunday. They had to make it always on Sunday, the Omer. And then they counted from then 50 days, so Shavuos could come out 55 days after Pesach began. Anyhow, so we hold like the majority opinion that there is the obligation of Tosefet for every single Shabbos and Yom Tov. Okay, now, and it's a mitzvah sesa d'oraita. Mitzvah sesa d'oraita to add a few minutes before and after Shabbat to the holiness of Shabbat. Now, let's discuss kavanat hamitzvah. Okay, so we said besides doing some mitzvah, doing any mitzvah, we have to have kavanah that I'm doing it for the sake of a mitzvah, to perform the mitzvah that Hashem commanded me to add on a few moments before Shabbat. Hareini mechaven lekayem mitzvat tosefet Shabbat. Where do we have that intent when we're adding some moments, some minutes before Shabbat? So candle lighting for a woman is correct. That definitely, she says, Shabbat. So she's saying the bracha there. And she's making it obvious that she's adding Michol ala Kodesh. She's adding a few minutes, 20 minutes. 20 minutes, it's a nice chunk of Tosefet from before sunset. 20 minutes before, she's lighting candles. So she definitely, for women, we definitely solve the issue of Kavana by candle lighting and saying the bracha. What about men? So there we could say that the mere fact that we have to say, and this is something we have to be aware of, we've said it many times in class here, that you have to say, Shabbat Kodesh. Without that, you're not even fulfilling the mitzvah besides the kavana. That's another whole issue. But besides that, where is it the Tosefet Shabbos? Just because you're walking to shul, that doesn't mean you're adding on to the holiness you're adding on the holiness of Shabbos to a weekday. You're just walking to shul. But how does that mean that you're adding to Tosefet Shabbos? You have to say it literally.
You can't do that because you have a mitzvah. It's dangerous.
Oh, okay. That's an excellent question. If you do that, right. We spoke about this. If we do accept Shabbat earlier than Mincha, before Mincha time, then we can't daven Mincha. The Mishnah Berurah says, Tarte de Satre. You put yourself into a conflict because if you accept Shabbat, then it's already Shabbos for you. If you haven't daven Mincha yet, so you have to daven Mincha the weekday Mincha Friday. That's contradictory. You just started Shabbat and you're davening a Mincha of Friday. That doesn't work. So the Mishnah Berurah says, he says best to daven Mincha Gdola on Friday. Every Friday, try to daven Mincha Gdola at 1 o'clock, 1:30, 12:30, whatever, 2 o'clock, wherever you find the Mincha Gdola. That's best on Friday because then you gain the possibility to accept Shabbat early and not have a conflict with davening Mincha, having to daven Mincha. So daven Mincha at 1:30, 2 o'clock. And then you can accept Shabbat 20 minutes or 15 minutes or 10 minutes before sunset. And you have a great addition to the Shabbos, to Tosefet Shabbos. You're fine. If you didn't daven Mincha early, and unfortunately, the Minchas in all shuls all over the country, except for Yerushalayim and Petah Tikva, are 10 minutes. Golan except 40 minutes before? Wow, I never heard of that. That's new. Okay, could be. But those who accept Shabbat 20 minutes before Shkia, like in the where it says candlelighting in our calendars, it's 20 minutes before Shkia. Most shuls daven 10 minutes later. They begin Mincha 10 minutes after candlelighting. That's their set time for most shuls in Israel. Which means when you finish Mincha, you're at Shkia. That's it. And it doesn't take less than 10 minutes. So you're davening 10 minutes, you finish Aleinu, you finish Kaddish, and then you're at Shkia. So you haven't accepted the Tosefet Shabbos. You missed the mitzvah d'oraisa of the Tosefet Shabbos. So there are two ways to solve this if you haven't davened Mincha before. One is after you finish your own private Shmoneh Esrei, which could be 4 or 5 minutes before Shkia, because we've started 10 minutes before. So it takes Ashrei, Kaddish, and then private Shmoneh Esrei could be 4 or 5 minutes. So you're 4 or 5 minutes before Shkia that you're finished with your private Shmoneh Esrei. At that moment, you could say, Hareini mekabel atzmi tosefet Shabbat Kodesh. Even within in the midst of Chazar Sashat, doesn't matter. You're not saying anything anymore. You're just saying Amen, Amen, Amen. You're not praying anymore. So you could say alone to yourself, Hareini mekabel atzmi tosefet Shabbat Kodesh. The moment you finish Shmoneh Esrei. And then you gain those 4 or 5 minutes at the Tosefet Shabbos, and then it's not contradictory to Mincha because you finished Mincha already. So that's one option. The only one that cannot do that option is the Chazan, because he has to say the Chazar Sashatz, and it's a weekday Chazar Sashatz. He can't say that before he begins Chazar Sashatz. That's one person. The other person who can't do this is the person who davens long, because he'll finish his private Shmoneh Esrei when the tzibur is finishing Aleinu anyhow. So he doesn't have time to say Shabbat Kodesh before he finishes Shmoneh Esrei. After he finishes Shmoneh Esrei, he no longer has. By the way, what's the minimum amount to consider a Tosefet Shabbos? How many minutes is minimum before Shkia that we're fulfilling the mitzvah of Shabbos? 2 minutes. that's Moshe Feinstein, that's Eretz Tzvi, that's the Sharat Tziyun of the Mishnah Berurah. They all come out to 2 minutes. That's the minimum amount. Less than that is not considered fulfilling the mitzvah with the Tosefet Shabbos. So again, for normal average people, mincha that starts 10 minutes before Shkia, they finish their private Shmoneh Esrei 4 or 5 minutes before Shkia, and then they have those 2 minutes minimum to accept Shabbat, and they're fine with the Tosefet Shabbos. But those who don't finish the Shmoneh Esrei 2 minutes before, because it takes them longer, or the Chazan himself, so the best way to, after all, accept the Tosefet Shabbos and fulfill the mitzvah, and yet being able to daven mincha, is by saying before mincha, before you start mincha, you say, Hareini mekabel atzmi Tosefet Shabbat Kodesh, li'inyan isur asiyat melacha. I'm accepting upon myself the additional time of Shabbat, only regarding refraining from melach, which means you haven't accepted Shabbat as if the day has begun. The day has not begun yet. You can still daven mincha. It's still Friday. But I'm accepting upon myself the holiness of Shabbat regarding refraining from melach. And that's the main essence of the Tosefet Shabbos. How do we know that? Because the pasuk we learned out to Tosefet Shabbos from the Torah was B'tisha l'chodesh ba'erev, me'erev aderev, tishbetu Shabbatchem. What's tishbetu Shabbatchem mean? It means refrain from work. So you see the main essence of Tosefet is from refraining from work when doing any chil Shabbos. And that's definitely true. When we come to shul before mincha, we're not planning on doing any melacha anymore before Shabbos, except for the gabbai who still needs to arrange all the Shalom Shabbat in the shul and lights and whatever he needs to do. So you should do that before mincha, finish all that, and then say, only I'm conditioning my Tosefet that it should only apply to refraining from work, refraining from malacha, not to make it an actual day of Shabbat yet. And then we can daven mincha, and yet we're considered as fulfilling the mitzvah S of the Tosefet Shabbos.
The summer months for those that make early Shabbos.
Ooh, they've got tons of Tosefet.
Right, there's no Tosefet Shabbos. They don't have to make any kind of statement.
No need to make any.
There
is a long Tosefet Shabbos by the fact that they say Mizmor Shir Yom Shabbos. That's enough.
Way before Shkia.
Way before Shkia. They get a great, right? They don't need to say anything, right?
But up to the point where they say there's more Shir Yom Shabbat.
They haven't said the Shabbat yet. They can do anything they want. Right.
What about the Kavana adding on?
What's that?
The Motzi Shabbos, when you add on, you're supposed to have Kavana.
Oh, that's what I'm getting to. So until now, we've been speaking about the Tosefet Shabbos before Shabbat, and then since it involves thinking or saying something to accept Shabbat, so that could be considered like Kavana to Mekayim the mitzvah to Tosefet Shabbos. That's what you're doing. Accepting Shabbat, you could add Lekayem mitzvat Tosefet Shabbat. Say the word mitzvat Tosefet Shabbat, so definitely your intent is to fulfill a mitzvah. So that's perfect for Kavana and for fulfilling the mitzvah by accepting Shabbat early. And now Sander's a question comes up, and that's what this fellow asked Rabbi Filmaka. Now we finally come to his question. He asked him, what about Motzei Shabbos? Motzei Shabbos at Tzeta Kochavim, twilight, that's when the day ends, for sure. Meaning we have the questionable time of Ben Hashmashos, but for sure it ends by Tzeta Kochavim. Let's say that's around 5 o'clock these days. It's around 5 o'clock, that's Tzeta Kochavim. That's why we daven Ma'ariv at 5 on a weekday, because that's Tzeta Kochavim.
22 minutes after Shkia.
20 minutes, right. Usually it's calculated 20 minutes after Shkia, right. Now, when did Shabbat exterminate yesterday? Do you remember? 5:16, perfect.
16 minutes later.
16 minutes later. Where did that come from? Why do we need 16 minutes of refraining from malacha after 5 o'clock? 5 o'clock is the end of the day for sure, totally. The answer is Tosefet Shabbos. The same as the Gemara learned out from B'tisha l'chodesh ba'erev, tishbetu Shabbatchem. The Gemara also said, but it says me'erev aderev tishbetu Shabbatchem, meaning that we need to do Tosefet also in the end of the day, not only in the beginning of the day.
That's much more than 2 minutes of our Moshe.
much more than 2 minutes. The reason is because we want to add on the Yeraim. The Yeraim holds that the Ben Hashmashos continues. No, that's before Shabbat. We had a Yeraim that says that the Ben Hashmashos before Shkia. There's a reason why we had 15. It's usually 15, 16 minutes from Tzeitzah Kochavim. It's not only due to Tosefet Shabbos. It has also another explanation. I don't remember why. Another explanation of we're not sure exactly when Tzeitzah Kochavim is. In any case, Shlomo Zalman held that it's not only 20 minutes after Shkia. It's more like 27 in the summertime and 23 in the wintertime. Because it's Shod Zmaniyot. It's the relative minutes. It's not 20 minutes exactly by the clock.
5:16 is still longer than that.
Right, but then you need to Sefet. So let's say in the summertime, if it's 27 minutes, so and usually it's like 15 minutes, so it's already halfway just to be considered Tzeitzah Kochavim, and then a few more minutes of Tosefet. The more the merrier, because 2 minutes is the minimum, but the more you add, the greater mitzvah you get. So we don't mind that it's 16 instead of 2. Or yeah.
Can you do 2 minutes after 20 or 3 minutes after?
Again, because of the issue of tzeis may be 27 minutes after. Just tzeis before you even start calculating the Tosefet Shabbos. So better not. The only thing I do hear of that happens in many places is sometimes daven Mariv earlier than the timing of the calendar to say when Motzei Shabbos is. Some Inyanim begin Mariv earlier. And that's okay. In Chutz La'aretz more so?
Yeah, it's very rare to find.
Yeah, but I've heard even in Eretz Yisrael that they do 10 minutes. Oh, yeah? Only 1 minute in Ranana? I've heard in Yerushalayim. Right, something like that. Right. Yeah, because they don't gain much, but like in the summertime, you can gain more. You have more of a need to do that because it's so late. So you want to get married in earlier, but they can do that because they're davening at least 10 minutes after Tzeis, which definitely gives them to Tosefet Shabbos. So yeah, B'Shadat Chak you could do that. Over there, the difference is that's before Shabbat, not after. Yeah, for before Shabbat, the difference is they light their candles 40 minutes before Shkia, unlike the rest of the country who does 20 minutes before Shkia. Now, 40 minutes before Shkia gives them plenty of time to daven Mincha and accept Shabbat without having to do all these tricks that we said before after your private Shmoneh Esrei, or to condition it only for Malacha. They don't need all that. They daven
Mincha. Their Mincha 10 minutes after candlelight.
Right, but they start 25 minutes usually. The average shuls in Yerushalayim, that's how I grew up, is 25 minutes after candlelighting. 25 minutes after candlelighting is still 15 minutes before Shkia. Because out of 40, subtract 25, you get 15. So if you're down in 15 minutes before Shkia,
5 minutes ahead of
5 minutes ahead of how we do it. So we have 5 minutes to accept after Aleinu. We still have 5 minutes to accept the Sefet Shabbos, which is wonderful. I had spoken when Rav Neuwirth used to be the rabbi here, Zechor Livracha. I had spoken to him about having this shul daven earlier mincha, right? Every Friday night, in order to gain the Sefet Shabbos even after you finish Aleinu. There's all these tricks people don't know about, and they're missing to Sefet Shabbos every single Shabbos.
What do you say?
So it's a little complicated because that means that the husband has to leave the house way before his wife lights candles. Because if it's like 5 minutes after candle lighting, you can't make it to candle lighting and coming to shul. And some people wouldn't like that. They want to be with their wives as they're lighting candles, even though it's not necessary. You can light the candles alone and you're on the way to shul already. You don't need to be there, but a lot of men have this custom of being together with their wives and saying Amen. So it's a little complicated. What I was able to do now with Rav Atlas as a rabbi, they do it a little bit earlier than it used to be. Not 5 minutes necessarily. They do it to the closest round number of after candle lighting. Time. So let's say if candle lighting is 4:16, no, not the round number, with a minimum. There's a minimum, but close to round, meaning 4:25, right? That's what Mincha was. 4:17, Shabbos came in, candle lighting. We're there 4:25, so it's less than 10 minutes, right? 7 instead of 10. So we gain those 2 minutes that we can really accept Shabbat. And that's how it's done almost every Shabbos, that we now in the shul is structured in a way that most of the time you have enough time of those 2 minutes to accept Shabbat, even after Aleinu.
Your lapper makes the calendar, no?
No, it's John Jacobson. Yeah, he does the timing. He does all the timing now. Maybe used to be maybe Aaron Lamper. So that works quite well. The problem is that the community isn't aware of the fact that we have those 2 minutes. Yeah, you have to say something. You have to say, Shabbat Kodesh. You finish Aleinu. So even better than making it complete is by the Gabbai giving a clap on the bima after Mincha and saying, please say with me, Hareini mekaber al atzmi tosefet Shabbat Kodesh. The entire congregation should say that out loud. And then that's perfectly solves the whole issue. That also has to be done. I really should speak to Rav Atlas to see if he's willing to implicate that into our routine. It doesn't do any harm to anyone just to say those few words together, and we gain a whole mitzvah that we may not gain otherwise.
You can only do that, in my opinion, before Chazar Hashos.
Why? If you daven 7 minutes after Shkia, let's say an average, so you're finishing in 10 minutes. That's
it's plus minus 12, 13 minutes.
Oh yeah, not 10. Not 10.
Very.
I know it's a weekday mincha.
They don't start to.
Not
the biggest crowd.
Right, but okay.
You will never get the extra 2 minutes.
I won't get. So by the way, that's a good idea also to say it before Chazar Hashatz. Right, then you give a clap and everyone say it. But then some people are still davening. But okay, so they miss. But they're reminded, right? They're reminded by everyone else saying it. They're reminded to say it themselves, right?
But if you wait till then, you will never get it. You just won't.
So you know what? Maybe before Aleinu, after you finish Chazar Hashatz, Kaddish Shalem, right before Aleinu, use the clap.
That's like 90 seconds.
Right. Yeah, right. It's all accurate according to the clock. Yeah. I think it's the only mincha that we prefer that it's done fast because we want to make it to the Sefer Shabbos. Anyhow, so the last point is the Sefer Shabbos for after Shabbos. That's the new chiddush that I got from this radio show. He asked Rav Malka, how do we mark the fact that we're fulfilling a mitzvah of the Sefer Shabbos? We're in Shabbos. It's Tzeitar Kochavim at 5 o'clock. We go all the way till 5:16 until we start Davi Mariv. We have 16 minutes with the Sefer Shabbos, which is a beautiful amount of time. Even according to Shlomo Zalman, that we subtract a few minutes because it's not yet Tzeitz, but still we have a nice 10 minutes at least of the Sefer Shabbos. So the fact that we're refraining from malacha, that's clear, because for us it's Shabbos. We don't do any malacha. So we're adding on to Shabbos for sure. That's no question. But where are we specifying, acknowledging the fact that we're, by doing so, we're fulfilling a mitzvah of the Sefer Shabbos? Where is the kavana, the intent to do the mitzvah of the Sefer Shabbos? Refraining isn't enough. That's like putting on tefillin. Now, you could say that what David said to begin with, the Chayadam. The Chayadam says if you do something that's unusual, so that means you're fulfilling a mitzvah. Why are we continuing Shabbos longer than or past Seis? It has to be because of the Sefer Shabbos. Why else would we not jump to our phones and check what happened the whole Shabbos? What's stopping us from doing so? The only thing is the Sefer Shabbos. So it's obvious that we're doing it for the Sefer Shabbos purposes. But that's only the Avad. And I can tell you that some people don't run to their phones. Even after 5:16, after making Abdallah, they prefer not touching their phone. Even the whole Motzei Shabbat, they don't want to touch it. So for some people, you can't even mark something specific that shows that they're connecting to Sefer Shabbos. By the fact that they're still with their clothes, they wear their Shabbos clothes through the whole evening. So for some people, it's not even obvious that they're doing something unusual to reconsider to Sefer Shabbos. So for them, it could be they're missing the mitzvah totally because it's me'akev. The kavanah is me'akev. The kavanah means you don't have kavanah intent to add on to the Shabbat. You're just lazing around, sitting around and talking, schmoozing. That doesn't necessarily mean you're doing it for the purpose of Tosefet Shabbos. Some people aren't even aware that there is such a mitzvah to have Tosefet Shabbos in the end of Shabbos. So where's their mitzvah? It's gone.
While you're benching after Sudas Shishit, sometimes that's going to be after Seid.
Perfect. What Alan just said is what the Piskei Tshuvos, that's why I checked after Rav Filmaka's answer. His answer was, by the way, that true that according to the Chai Adam, the fact that we're not running to do things that are weekday things, rather we're waiting 16 minutes and still continuing the Shabbos atmosphere, could count as, by the Chai Adam's idea of acting unusual, that could count as if we have kavanah of mitzvah to Sefer Shabbos, but it's only the evidence. So he says, real lechatchila, and that was this new halacha that I just received and accepted already this past Shabbat. I did it. This is Thursday evening that I heard it. This past Shabbat, after 5 o'clock, I said, Areini mechaven lekayem mitzvah tosefet Shabbat. That's all you need to say. After past 5 o'clock, past Tzeis, you say from now on until the end of Shabbat, I'm mechaven to be mekayim the mitzvah tosefet Shabbat. Very simple. What's that?
Why did Tzeis say that?
Right at or 5 minutes after, it doesn't matter. As long as you have 2 minutes, minimum 2 minutes before Mariv, you accomplish the mitzvah. Better to say right after it says, because then you get a longer mitzvah. You get it 60 minutes instead of 2 minutes. But anytime you remember after 5, before more than 2 minutes before Mariv, say that line and you're fine. You've gained a mitzvah now. New mitzvah.
You should say that for the year. I take upon myself at least Shabbos at say I'm going to do Sefer Shabbos.
Yeah, you could do that.
Because you don't forget.
Right, but it's not enough. I'll tell you why.
Why is not enough?
One of those things that you can condition something for the whole year. Yeah. You say you declare something for the whole year. Yeah. When is that enough? No, not because of the neder issue. Here you want to make it a neder because you have no problem that the Sefer Shabbos should apply every Shabbos. You're not going to do anything before 5:16, before the end of Shabbos. The thing is, it's not enough because when does those declarations, when do they accept? When do they work? Only for things that are issues that are based on our behavior of different details within our behavior. Meaning, for example, if you say a bracha at home, any bracha you say at home, and you haven't left the house, and you, after half an hour, you want to eat another food that has the same bracha you said before, so that would be included in the bracha you've said half an hour ago. But in order to make sure that you would need to say another bracha, we think in our mind that anytime we say a bracha, brikas hanenin, over every food that we eat, we mean for it to include all foods that we eat until we leave the house. That's the best way to solve all kinds of sveikos and brachos. And that we can think once a year. But right before Rosh Hashanah, we say, every time we make a bracha this year, of brikas hanenin in our home before we leave the house, it should include all foods that have the same bracha to them. They have the same bracha, even 2 hours later, 5 hours later. That's the best way to solve all kinds of sveikos and brikas hanenin. But that's a detail within the conduct of brachos, within the details of halachos of brachos. But to say that we are intending on fulfilling a mitzvah every time we do a certain action, that has to be specifically before each mitzvah we perform. It doesn't help that we said every time we do such and this action, we mean for it to be a mitzvah. It has to be right before that mitzvah is done. That's the difference between what we can declare upon and what doesn't help to declare upon it. We have to do every single Shabbos. After past Tzeis, you have to check in the calendar when Tzeis is. It's usually approximately 15 minutes before the extermination of Shabbat. That's usually approximately the Tosefet that we have. So if we calculate, let's say 10 minutes, always for sure 10 minutes before the extermination of Shabbat is past Tzeis already, no question. So take every single Shabbos, 10 minutes before extermination of Shabbat, stop everything and say, Hareini mechaven lekayem mitzvah Tosefet Shabbat. B'yitziata. You can add b'yitziata in the end of Shabbos. You don't need to. Just say Tosefet Shabbat. That's it. So simple and so necessary, at least to become lechatchila, if not even to gain a mitzvah. If we don't say that it's an unusual, that you're doing something unusual by sitting around and schmoozing after Shabbos. But what Alan said is perfect. If you bench Birkas Hamazon past Tzeis, some people finish the Sudat Rishit before Tzeis, so it doesn't work. But those who finish the Sudat Rishit after Tzeis, which we're allowed to continue eating past Tzeis because we started before Shkia. As long as you start before Shkia, Sudat Rishit, you can eat past Tzeis. If you say Birkas Hamazon past Tzeis, you're saying within Birkas Hamazon, Retzeh v'achlitzenu b'yom HaShabbat hazeh. The Retzeh v'achlitzenu says the Piskei Teshuvos. This Rav Malka did not say in his radio show. But the Piskei Teshuvos adds this. When you say Retzeh, then it's an obvious intent, kavana, of Tosefet Shabbos. Because how can you say now Retzeh v'achlitzenu b'yom HaShabbat hazeh if it's not Shabbos? Although I'm thinking now, it's not so simple that it works, because we go by Ritzeh, we go by the beginning of the meal. When do we say Ritzeh or Yalev Yavo or Alanisim? Every time we have to recite some additional part of the Birkas Hamazon, how do we decide if it's timely or not? By the beginning of the meal. When do we start the meal? If someone started the meal, let's say, the last moments before Shkia of the 8th day of Hanukkah, he started a bread meal. And he goes way past Hanukkah, way past Tzedek Kochavim. He's now benching, one of my kids actually had that occur to them this past Hanukkah. The 8th day of Hanukkah, they washed for bread before 4:40. And then they needed to say Birkas Hamazon past Tzedek Kochavim. It's no longer Hanukkah. But they had to say Alanisim. You still say Alanisim because you go by the beginning of the meal, not by the end when you say the Birkas Hamazon. It depends when you started. So you're saying not because it's Shabbos now necessarily, rather because you started when it was still Shabbos. So it may not help you. The Piskei Teshuvos says yes, that is a declaration that you mean to continue to Tosefet Shabbos by saying Shabbat. But I'm not so sure it's correct, because he doesn't quote anyone. He says it on his own. The Piskei Teshuvos, he's not a Gadol Ador. He's a person who compiled, who summarized a lot of the Teshuvos of the Gedolim. That's the book of Piskei Teshuvos. It's a summary of a lot of Teshuvos of Gedolei Ador. But this he made up on his own, that if you say Ritzeh and Birkas Hamazon past Tzedek Kochavim, that's as if you've accepted Tosefet Shabbos, declared that it's Tosefet Shabbos, and that's your kavanah. I'm not sure he's right, but in any case, it's best if you just say that one line, very short line. Hareini mechaven lekayem mitzvah Tosefet Shabbat.
Is it okay to say that in English?
Sure. And my intent is for me now to fulfill the mitzvah of Tosefet Shabbos, or an addition to the Shabbos. Yeah.
What minute number should we use to calculate from Shkia when Tzeis? 18, 23?
No, 18 for sure not. 20 minimum. 20 minimum. All year round. So Rav Yosef holds all year round 20 minutes. It doesn't change. 20 minutes. That's how most shuls in Israel, that's what they follow. Shlomo Zalman said that it depends winter or summer because it depends, relatively speaking, Shod's Maniyot, from sunrise to sunset, or dawn, it's safe, depending on Magen Avraham Agra, how long that is. You calculate, you divide by 12, and then your hour is in 60 minutes. It's a different amount of hours.
So usually passing from Shlomo Zalman,
right.
From Yosef. So can we pick and choose?
No. I would prefer you go by Shlomo Zalman because that's how we go by normally.
I'm not into mathematics so much, so give me a number I can use.
There isn't a number really because it varies between the days. I would say in general, wintertime, 23 minutes, 23 as a minimum, which by the way, it makes me say Kriyat Shema every day over again if I daven the normal Ma'ariv in shuls in Israel, because shuls in Israel follow 20 minutes to begin Ma'ariv. By the time you're at Kriyat Shema, it's 20.5 minutes because it's half a minute till you get to Kriyat Shema. Unfortunately, the speed like crazy. So you say the two brachos before Kriyat Shema very quickly. You're at Kriyat Shema at the max 21 minutes. Max. You get a 1 minute till you get to Kriyat Shema. And then you say the entire Kriyat Shema all year round before it says. And that doesn't count. So I'm always saying Kriyat Shema over again after Ma'ariv.
Daven the earliest Ma'ariv.
If I daven the earliest Ma'ariv. The on-time Ma'ariv. The on-time Ma'ariv is not on time. That's what I'm trying to say. It's too early. The on-time Ma'ariv is not on time. Yeah, right. What shita you're following? Everybody else safe would be fine with it. We're not. So again, wintertime, 23 minutes after Shkia would be fine for saying Kriyat Shema. Daven Ma'ariv and say Kriyat Shema. And summertime, 27 minutes.
25 would be pretty good.
Oh, that's a good compromise. That's what the Shmir Shabbos Kil Chasad decided. Exactly what David just said. 25 minutes all year round. All year round. Which is almost every single day of the year, it's okay. But some days it should reach 27, but 25 is safe enough. Right? You definitely included Rabbi Yosef's opinion in that. And most of the days of the year, someone that would also be pleased with 25. So the Shmir Shabbos finalizes 25 all year round. That gives you a nice set number. But most Ma'arivs all year round, in most places, the on-time Ma'ariv is 20 minutes after. And then you never get to 25. But in the end, after Aleinu, you're past the 27. You're past 30 minutes because it takes 10 minutes Ma'ariv. So you're nicely past Tzeis for according to all opinions, except for Chazon Ish. Chazon Ish holds 35 minutes after Shkia is Tzeis. Not about Rabbeinu Tam, that's totally much later. But the Chazon Ish held that the regular, normal Geonim opinion is 35 minutes after Shkia. So by him, you're not Yotze any Kriyat Shema all year round in the on-time Ma'ariv, and not even if you say it immediately after. It was wait 10 minutes or so, and then say Kriyat Shema over. To be Yotze the Chazon Ish. But we don't need to be that stringent. And right after Aleinu, you sit down and sit and repeat Kriyat Shema over again.
B'nai Brak today, if I would have a Marv B'nai Brak, I'd have a Marv, all already is 5 o'clock Marv tonight.
Yeah.
5:05. And you're saying a B'nai Brak that I can't find a 5:05 Marv B'nai Brak?
You'll definitely find because they don't. Not everyone follows the Chazon Ish, but there he's the Ma'adatra, but not everyone follows. There's the Chazon Ish Nikim. There are those Chazon Ish Nikim who you won't find davening at that time, right? But not all of Bnei Brak, Chazon Ish, yeah. And the Minin factories, they have Mincha Mari, even the following day, still having Mari. Okay, Shkayach, Shavua Tov Malach. Very welcome.